Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good, from science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I am Rafe, and it is going to be a great show today for all the reasons that it's normally a great show, but we have a very special big brain smarthead with us tonight. So before we get there, you are the world's greatest listeners, and you guys know that because by some miracle of numerical C, we are a global top 10% podcast. As usual, you can reach us at buffnagle@buffnagle.com. Remember, share the love, share the buff. Give us a 5-star review, subscribe, hit like, smiley stars, tell a friend to listen, and you will get a free episode. And you can even click a link somewhere in the show notes and buy me a coffee or a new trombone or a Tesla or something. You buy me something. Today's guest, our big brain smarthead, is none other than the world famous America's favorite rocket scientist, Bob Luzenski. Not only America's favorite rocket scientist, America's favorite Bufnagle big brain smarthead. Bob, how are you tonight?
Rafe, I'm wonderful. As always, it is an absolute pleasure to rejoin you here in the Bufnagle virtual studio to record another episode.
I looked. It's been like 4 months since we talked.
Has it been that long?
Yep. And so I had made a little list of things we want to talk about. And the first thing on my list is, how are you? I mean, like we talked like in October, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and now it's springtime's coming.
We hope.
Yeah.
Maybe sooner for you because you're south of me.
Yes. And I heard that it's working its way north because daffodils are doing daffodil things and you have bulbs and things. So how are you?
I'm good. It's been an interesting winter
Right.
This past couple months. I can say for certain that I am happy that as we record this, it is now the month of March in 2025. We are done with February, which is, as all of us who live in the more northern latitudes know, February is the longest month of the year.
Well, it is. And I heard somebody say that they hate February so much that they're going to skip February altogether and just put 59 days in January. I'm sure it's going to be a lot better.
Except January isn't anything.
Well,
isn't all that great either.
It takes a while to get into January.
Yes,
you're coming out of it, right? So that way, it's better than putting it in March. You get negative days in March. Then
we don't want to ruin March. We want to be happy that March is here.
That's right. So spring is coming, and your bulbs are planning to bulbatize, do bulbing things.
We had. This winter has been more like a normal winter than last year, where we hardly had any snow. And I not only had bulbs coming out of the ground by the end of February, I had blooms by the end of February last year. None of that this year. It's much more normal. We had, maybe 5-10 inches of snow covering the ground. Through a couple of snow systems that went through, and of course the miracle of lake effect snow that we have here in Michigan. And
it's miraculous. Look
where
at all that
it
snow.
Just doesn't. You guys, or say my son in Wisconsin. A snowstorm passes through, it drops snow, and then that's the end of it, right? Here, it's the gift that just keeps on giving. For like 2 or 3 days after a snowstorm goes through, we get yet another inch or two, every day.
It keeps on giving.
It just keeps on giving.
Well, the bulb discussions that we've had now for several years, several springs here on the Buff, has I don't know if I ever told you this. Last fall or late summer, sometime, my wife went and got some bulbs last year, and they are in the ground outside our house.
That's exciting.
I don't know. I don't remember what they are. They remember she was like, I was like, I'll dig the holes. You hand them to me. Right. So that was the thing. So, dig, plant, dig, plant, dig, plant.
Yep.
And so they are, and I don't know if we have 50 or 100 or 50, 100. I don't know. There's bulbs around. What should I expect? When should I start looking?
Well, because you planted them last fall, they won't come up as early as bulbs that are established. You're going to, they didn't have any roots on them when you planted them. So
that's correct.
They have to establish a root system. And so the first year they're always later than they would be otherwise if they had been there. So don't worry too much about that, but you'll see things poking out of the ground at some point. And, when they bloom, I want to see some pictures.
We will send some pictures. If we did video episodes, we'd do an episode with me sitting in front of my new bulbs is what we would do. But so you can just imagine, maybe we'll do that when they have the screen background. We'll just put me in in Holland or something where they have all sorts of stuff. All right. So the bulbs are coming along.
So the bulbs, the snow finished melting this week, and we had some rain, and it turned out that the bulbs were poking out of the ground, with the snow over top of them. And probably the ones that I have that are tallest right now are maybe 3 to at most 4 inches in the front of the house, which is facing south. In the back of the house, they're just starting to poke up out of the ground. They're maybe an inch. Some of them, not all of them.
But they're doing their thing.
They're coming. They're coming. Right. There's crocuses, which are usually first, and then daffodils will be coming after that, and then other things after that.
Whatever else is. Now, have we discussed whether or not you can eat these bulbs? Have we had that? I can't believe we haven't had that discussion.
I don't know. I don't.
You don't plant things like onions.
I know we haven't had the discussion, and I don't have an answer if you ask the question. So don't.
Okay. All right. Then
we have other things to talk about today.
Yes. We have a couple of things. One of those, though, is you. I know we were trying to schedule this a little bit ago, and you were busy doing a train show.
Yes.
In Trainland, you were doing where were you?
As some of the more astute listeners, longtime listeners, know that one of my many hobbies, but probably my most I don't even know how to say this. The one I've been focusing on the most since I've been retired is the model railroading hobby, and there are a number of reasons to like model railroading. Biggest is just all the different aspects of it that are fun to do. And then there's social aspects to it. It's just great fun. But one of the parts of the hobby that I participate in is modular model railroading, where you build a quote module that is a chunk of model railroad that you can put in your car or a trailer if you're more committed than I am. Yes. If it doesn't fit in my car, it doesn't go.
It doesn't go. Right.
So, and that's my rule. But in January, for the first time, myself and a few of my other friends who are part of this loose association of modular model railroaders went to the big train show out east, which is in Springfield, Massachusetts. So we went there and we set up with others who build to the same modular standard that we do. And we built a railroad, and then we ran the railroad during the train show. We were one of a number of model railroads that were on display at this train show. The train show is huge. It's arguably the biggest train show in the country. It's spread across 4 buildings. There's vendors there. There's people selling stuff. There are actual manufacturers displaying their newest releases there. It's quite a show. So
are you seeing? Because the discussion that I always had with model railroading, and I think we had this when we first started, is that a lot of old guys do it. But you have a nephew who has joined your little group, at least tangentially. Are you seeing more young people get involved?
There are young people.
Is it starting to come up?
There in the hobby, there's this hand wringing about how we've got to get young people into the hobby, and I think it's nonsense, and I think the panic about it is nonsense. It is. There's never been a better time to be a model rarer. I mean, the models that the manufacturers are releasing are so much better than they were when I got in the hobby 20 to 25 years ago. I mean, it's stunning what they're releasing now. And the thing is, it's not a cheap hobby. It's not an inexpensive hobby. As you know, the Lego hobby is not
the Lego hobby is not, the woodworking hobby is not, ham radio is not. Hobby is probably an acronym for
fishing is not. I mean,
how
much money can you spend entertaining yourself? So young people, aren't necessarily going to be able to afford to do it, and so there's a point where you reach in your life. For me, it was I turned 40, and I had money, and my son was born, and it turned out he was interested in trains for a while he was young, and that got me started going to the hobby store, and then I discovered this wonderful hobby, and away I went.
Yeah. Well, good. So you went out to Springfield, Mass.
Yep.
Came back in a snowstorm, if I remember right.
First day was snowing, and then I started getting sick on the first day
even
back.
better. Yeah, it's more fun. It's like a localized storm.
The second day was worse. It was bad, but I somehow managed to make it home. And then over the course of the next few weeks, recovered from what is euphemistically referred to as the Springfield crud.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And I've been feeling good for at least the second half of February, and as I like to say, aggressively pursuing my hobby.
All right. We like to do a lot of things aggressive. And speaking of aggressiveness, the world of space exploration is aggressivizing. And we've talked a lot about big rockets.
We have.
And I cannot believe that I wasn't thinking this. It is so obvious to me that this was going on in the background, but I'd never really thought about it. We have big rockets to get people places, but once they get there, they have to get to the surface of whatever planet or orbital body they're trying to get to. How do they get down? And that is the topic of landers. And that's really what we want to talk about tonight, is what's going on in the lander world and what progress are being made there.
Yep, that's the big topic, because there's a lot of exciting things going on. Not in human lunar landers, but in robotic lunar landers. But before we get to that, I would be remiss, as America's favorite rocket scientist, if I did not at least give an update on the big rockets.
Yeah,
a quick update on the big rockets.
Okay.
Because it ties in. There was the week before I went to the train show in January, it was a crazy busy week for spaceflight. We had both the Blue Origin New Glenn, which is Blue Origin's big rocket, as opposed to their suborbital New Shepard. New Shepard, named after Alan Shepard, the first American astronaut in space who flew a suborbital flight, and New Glenn is named after John Glenn, who was the first American to orbit the Earth. The New Glenn flew for the first time. In the middle of the night on January 16th, the very same day, later that day, SpaceX flew the Starship Super Heavy Flight 7. So that was a tough day, because I, had to stay up well past even my bedtime.
Which actually oftentimes is in the early or even mid morning, right?
2 a.m. is usually kind of like my upper limit, but that's when the lights automatically turn off in the living room here. So it's kind of a sign. It's just
you can change that,
you need to go to bed. It's past time. So yeah, I was up for that. And then later the ssame day, after sleeping and then getting up and having breakfast, there was this Starship launch. I do want to touch on both of those because they are significant milestones. The New Glenn launch was the first flight of the New Glenn rocket, which is, as I said, is Blue Origin's heavy lift rocket. It's been a long time coming, depending on how you look at things. But they developed a new rocket engine, which took some time to do, and then the new rocket, and it flew. It launched and successfully put into orbit a test satellite from Blue Origin that is testing out technologies that they want to use going forward. But there were some not quite normal parts to it. I mean, they did successfully really reach orbit, which was good. They had intended to try and land their first stage on I'm going to say on a boat out in the Atlantic Ocean.
Yep.
And that did not happen. The first stage, they lost contact with the first stage, and later it turns out the engines did not relight for the entry burn on the first stage, and their webcast was frustrating because they just kind of stopped talking about the first stage. It's like it didn't exist all of a sudden, and it's like, what happened to the first stage? What's going on? And just nothing. And so that's frustrating, but that's we're used to SpaceX, which does everything out in the open and is pretty open about what's going on. Yeah. And when instead you have the Blue Origin broadcast being run by a VP of communications or sales or whatever it is, it's just it's really hard for us space nerds to listen to.
Okay, so they had a new engine. Is this so? What makes a new engine a new engine? Is it?
It's a complete new design. And,
what do they do different? What do you do different?
Liquid oxygen and liquid methane, and it's better for reuse for a number of reasons. It's why the Raptor engine on the SpaceX Starship Super Heavy is also using the same propellants because it's just much better than using the liquid oxygen and liquid kerosene. So
I got to believe that getting methane. So
okay, you're doing it, and I've got to stop.
Sorry.
Here.
Okay, yeah.
We said this was going to be a quick update.
Yeah, okay, yes.
And,
okay, so that's update one.
I understand you want to ask all kinds of questions, and when we talk about the lunar landers, the restrictions are removed, and you can ask any questions you want.
I love that. Okay,
all right. So let's move on then. So that was New Glenn. They're planning on flying again sometime this spring, second quarter. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully, they fix the issues they had with relighting the engines on the on the lower stage, and they can do the recovery and reuse of that. Starship Flight 7 happened the same day, as it turned out, and it was very ambitious. It was the first flight of what is called Starship version 2 or Block 2 or I don't know, 2.0. It basically, they made a lot of changes. They changed how big the propellant tanks were. They changed the plumbing to the engines. They changed the maneuvering fins on the front of the Starship vehicle. A lot of changes. And they also added the PEZ dispenser for the Starlink satellites, which they were going to do a test on. First stage went up fine, separated, turned around, started to come back. One engine didn't light, but then during the landing burn, it did light, and they successfully landed the first stage again for the second time. Although this time, boy, you could see that thing rocking back and forth, when it got caught by the launch tower.
Yeah.
So second stage went on its merry way. Initially, everything looked fine. Then we started seeing on the webcast, that little display with the little circles for each of the engines.
Yep.
And there's 6 engines on Starship. We started seeing them wink out one at a time. And this was not a good thing. So, and at some point they lost communication with it. And then we started seeing, and they finished their broadcast, I'd say broadcast, it's a webcast. They finished the webcast, and then, you started looking online and you started seeing pictures and videos, and it was the Starship pieces just re-entering. What happened was the automatic flight termination system was working when they lost contact with the vehicle. So it was still working, and it actually took another couple minutes before the flight termination system actually activated and caused the vehicle to be destroyed, which caused the vehicle to break up into a whole bunch of smaller pieces, which then re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, wreaking havoc on air traffic in
the Caribbean, right?
In the Caribbean. It was quite spectacular. I mean, it looked amazing, but there were some aircraft that weren't prepared for the possibility, even though it was all published and this could happen. So there were a few commercial aircraft that declared emergencies because they were running low on fuel. There were a lot of things that happened there. So, and the the air traffic controllers for that area earned their keep that day. So,
well, they earn their keep every day, right? That's
true too. But they absolutely earned it that day. So that's what happened. Starship 7. They are now they have now worked through and made updates. It turns out the investigation found that the changes in the version 2 of Starship resulted in some harmonic vibrations in the new plumbing for the rocket engines, and that those vibrations were there wasn't anything they saw during their testing and presumably analysis, which is a little surprising, but this is they're trying to fly as fast as they can, so they may not be doing as much ground testing or analysis as they're doing flight testing. So this is going to happen.
Yep.
It's a balance between.
Well, that's why you do testing.
It's a balance between, how long do you spend on the ground doing analysis and testing on the ground versus, at some point you got to fly the thing and see what you can't analyze, find out the things that didn't show up in the analysis or ground testing. So
when they find that sort of thing, they figure out, well, there's harmonics going on in these plumbings. We have to strap them down tighter.
Yeah, we have to do something different, which they made some changes. They did do a 60-minute long, 60-second long firing on the ground after Flight 7 with the Starship that is flying on Flight 8. And they tested different thrust levels, different parameters, so they could get something that they knew would work. And they instrumented, of course, so they could see that the changes had a positive effect.
Well, that's great. Okay.
So yeah, it's ready to fly. It got the FAA approval on Friday and is expected to go on Monday. So that's one thing that's coming up this coming week. But it's not the first thing that's coming up.
The first thing that's coming up is starting early in the morning on the first day of the week, as we say.
Within hours from now. And I want to say, let's see, yes, it's 4, 5, 6, 7.
Well, okay, so
7.5 hours from now. Let's say that.
We're going to say by the time this episode drops,
by the time this episode
this
drops,
will have
happened.
That's
As will hopefully
tense.
the Starship Flight 8 as well.
Yep. Okay.
So the day before New Glenn and Starship flew, we had another launch. It was a launch on a Falcon 9, SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket, and it carried 2 vehicles, two lunar landers, as it turns out. One is from Firefly Aerospace, and it is called the Blue Ghost. Their lander that they've developed it's a commercial lunar lander called Blue Ghost. This is Blue Ghost Mission 1, which they've named Ghost Riders in the Sky.
What else would you call it?
What else would you call it? Blue Ghost, right? Yeah,
yes.
I'm wondering what they're going to call a second one, quite honestly. But actually, I could probably find out if I went to their website. But anyways, okay, we can't talk about Blue Ghost, and also we're going to talk about Intuitive Machines, Nova C landers. We can't talk about those landers without talking about the NASA Commercial Lunar Payload Services Program. And we've mentioned this before, but I don't know how much detail we went into. But the NASA decided in I want to say 2018, 2019, that the Artemis program was going to go back to the moon. We're going to send humans back to the moon. And we really should be doing some science and engineering testing on the lunar surface. And NASA wanted to encourage a commercial lunar industry. So they decided to request proposals from commercial companies for lunar landers that could then take science and engineering payloads for NASA to the moon and land them on the surface and do whatever they're going to do. And then also to, be like an anchor tenant for these landers, which then the companies can then go out and get other payloads from industry, from universities, anybody who wants to get something down on the moon. And
mine for lunar electric water.
Yes, lunar electric water, which we have talked about before.
Yes.
So they've done this, and it's taken a while to get to this point. We had 2 landers launch within a very short time last January, in early January. And the first one was fairly unsuccessful. It had a propellant tank leak not long after it had separated from the launcher, and it was not even able to enter lunar orbit. It ended up looping around the moon and coming back and re-entering Earth's atmosphere, and that was intentional to keep it from being litter in lunar orbit. So they right now there isn't that much floating around in lunar orbit, and
there's some stuff though, right?
There's a few things, and but we want to keep it clean for all the spacecraft we want to send.
The restrictions are off. Okay, yes. So you got junk floating around the moon. Eventually, it falls out of orbit. I would hope, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't have an atmosphere to bump into.
The moon doesn't have an atmosphere, so it doesn't slow things down. So anything that would come down because of the gravity. The moon's gravity is lumpy for a number of reasons.
It's lumpy?
It's lumpy. You look at the moon and you see those dark areas facing Earth, and it's lumpy.
Okay, this is wait.
We're not going to focus on this.
No. But the restrictions are off. This is not.
Yes.
Okay, so
we got to talk about the landers.
Yeah, we do, and landers have to deal with lumpy gravity on the moon.
Yes,
so
tell me, it requires
inconsistent.
maintenance.
Is that what you mean?
It requires maintenance to stay in orbit. So if you don't maintain if your spacecraft doesn't maintain the orbit, it's not going to stay in orbit. And if it comes down, it's going to come down really fast because it's still moving fast because there's no atmosphere like on Earth. On Earth, when things get too low, they start running into the atmosphere. It slows them down even more, and it's sort of it just piles on, and eventually the thing just kind of goes through the
Plummets.
atmosphere. And if it doesn't burn up, then pieces fall.
In the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Okay, but when you say the gravity is lumpy, does that mean that it's inconsistent?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, you didn't know that. Back in the Apollo. Oh, that's right. You weren't even born during the Apollo days, so you wouldn't have heard.
I know.
You wouldn't have heard this phrase, mass cons. They call them mass cons, which is short for mass
concentrations of mass.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So where there's a mountain on the moon, that's a concentration of mass, and that produces a bigger gravity suck right there.
Yes, gravity sucks, and
yes,
it wants to pull you towards it. So they didn't want that, and I can't remember the name of it. I looked it up earlier, but I forgot. And that was one, and then the other one was Intuitive Machines' Nova C lander. Nova C is the name of the lander class. It turns out Intuitive Machines also has a Nova D design for a lunar lander, but this is the Nova C. So that was Intuitive Machines Mission 1, and it landed on the moon, and it actually soft landed. But as you'll recall, it had a problem. It
tipped over, right?
As I remember this, it was a remove before flight thing that didn't get removed, and because it's a laser altimeter, and they don't want the laser light shining when people are working around it, so they had this thing on it, and it didn't get pulled off, and they didn't test it, and first flight of a new spacecraft, mistakes were made. And so they didn't have a laser altimeter, and they did this real big thing. They did this thing where they had a NASA experiment that was also a laser altimeter, and they did a quick software patch, but it turned out the software patch didn't work, even though they thought it did. And so the thing actually landed without a laser altimeter. So it didn't really have a good idea of how high it was above the lunar surface when it touched down. So it hit kind of hard, broke a leg, and tipped over.
Yeah.
And because it's the Intuitive Machines Nova C is a tall design, it's kind of tall and skinny, and that's because there's only a couple ways to stack the propellant tanks that keep the mass centered along the line of thrust of the engine down at the bottom. And one way is to stack them vertically, and that makes for a tall, skinny lander. The other way is what Blue Ghost, Firefly has done with the Blue Ghost lander, is to put them in a kind of square or diamond-shaped pattern, so that as the propellant is shot out through the engine, it goes evenly. It maintains kind of an equal balance there. So when you look at the Blue Ghost lander, it looks more like the lower half of the Apollo lunar module, down to the gold-colored thermal protection on the bottom of it, and it has four legs. It's short and wide, and it's a neat looking lander. I kind of like it. I've really gotten a kick out of the team that they have. They've done a video every week going out. They've been really good about communication. They've been really good about pictures. You saw, I sent you the link last night of they're in low lunar orbit now after it's commissioning the spacecraft in Earth orbit before committing to going to lunar orbit. And then they got into lunar orbit, and then they lowered their lunar orbit. So now they're in an orbit that's basically 100 kilometers above the surface of Luna, and it is about a 2-hour orbit. and soon the spacecraft will leave that orbit and descend down to a point where it will then ignite its main engine and the other engines to slow it down. And over the course of 11 to 12 minutes, we'll hopefully go from really fast sideways around the moon to falling vertically at a few meters per second, and then down to 1 meter per second, and then land. Once they're on the moon, the Blue Ghost lander has a couple different NASA experiments, as well as science experiments from industry and also from universities. And it's quite a laundry list. And I would encourage anybody who's interested to see, any of our listeners who are really interested in seeing what's going on this lander, that they should go to the Blue Ghost. They should go to the fireflyspace.com website and go to the Blue Ghost 1 page, and they can take a look at all these different things. There's also a bunch of infographics about the spacecraft itself and the landing, and where they're landing.
Is this the one that so there's stuff on it. Once it lands, it can do things like drill a hole in the ground and look for stuff.
Yeah, the purpose of these commercial lunar landers is to bring stuff to the moon, whatever their customers want to bring to the moon. And NASA has science and engineering payloads, and industry and universities, they've got things they want to do. There's a company testing a arm to collect samples from the lunar surface, and there's an experiment from NASA to test rejecting lunar dust using it's called the electrodynamic dust shield, using electrostatic
dust repulsion
fields to repel the dust or to remove the dust. It's a lot of interesting
really well
stuff.
in little kids' rooms.
Yeah, right. Anyways,
okay. But is this the lander is this the one that falls down and then bounces its way around? No.
So we talked about the Blue Ghost lander, which is landing tonight,
right?
And then that's March 2nd,
right?
There is there's two other lunar landers. We're not going to get to talk really about. There was another lunar lander that rode with Blue Ghost on the Falcon rocket, 9. And that's from a Japanese company called iSpace. They had flown a previous mission 1 back in 2023. It failed. Software. It was software.
Yeah, software.
It's always software.
Yeah, don't get me started.
It fell. It was hovering until its propellant ran out 5 kilometers above the surface. And when it ran out of propellant, it just fell the rest of the way.
Well, you can't blame software on that,
Yes, you can, because software thought that the altimeter wasn't working when it was.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah. Anyways, so that they've got a second mission flying. It's going to land later. It's taking the long way around because it's smaller and it doesn't have the propellant to do a quick trip. So it's got to take a long, slow trip, just like mission 1 did. But the other commercial lunar payload services lander launched this week on Wednesday night, and it is on its way to the moon. It also flew on a Falcon 9 rocket. And this is Intuitive Machines' Nova C lander mission 2, which they have called Athena. Mission 1, the lander was called Odysseus. Odysseus is the one that landed and fell and broke its leg, and sort of had a mission from.
And we all know Athena has better legs.
One would hope Athena has better legs. And so there's a lot going on this one. It launched Wednesday, took the fast route, planning to land on March 6th. Landing site is only 100 miles or so from the lunar South Pole, which is the farthest south any lander has attempted to land which is kind of cool. Since NASA wants to land humans down at the South Pole, this is a good test of that. It has several different really interesting payloads on it and other vehicles on it. It has a tiny little rover.
Yes.
That's actually not that. Actually, it has a small rover and then it has a tiny rover. So there's
all sorts of meta things going on here. Yes.
It's really cool. The small rover is cool. The little tiny rover is pretty cool too.
It's a rushing nesting dolls of rovers.
They're not. They don't nest, but It's still kind of cool because they both get deployed from the lander, and then it gets better. There's a hopper.
Yes, I did see that.
And the hopper launches from the side. It launches on rails from the side of the lander. Yes, it does. I'm not making this up.
And it just kind of bounces.
Okay, any of our listeners who are really curious, both Firefly, the Blue Ghost lander, and Intuitive Machines have really nice animations of both their missions, and the Intuitive Machines animation with the hopper, you're sitting there going, yeah, this is really cool. They just dropped this little tiny rover and it's kind of moving around. And then, whoa, what was that?
Yes.
it's this hopper that's just flying up into the not air.
Yep. Into
above the surface and then comes back down and lands next to the crater that they plan to land near. And then it gets better because then from there it goes and it hops again. And it lands into a permanently shadowed portion of that crater. Because it's so far near the South Pole, it's a permanently shadowed area. And there's a couple sensors on this hopper, including one that can potentially sense water. So it's really cool.
Okay. So we are going to kill this episode eventually.
I understand.
This episode will terminate eventually. So this thing hops. Okay. And everything's radio communication here. Is that an issue? I saw that thing go down into the hole.
Yes.
And I thought, how do we?
And so it gets even better. So one of the commercial payloads on the Athena mission is from Nokia. And it is basically a cell station on the moon, and it's LTE-4, I think.
They only got 4G.
It's only 4G, not 5G. But they think some of their tests, they think that the cell signal while the hopper is in the crater and not line of sight to the lander, they still may be able to receive signals from the hopper and send signals to the hopper by reflections off of the sides of the crater. So that'll be interesting to see if that works. That's darn near a science experiment in my book, and would be really cool if it ends up working. And then, of course,
you got to just bounce it up again and have it send the signal when it's up in the air.
But that's no fun. You want to talk to it while it's on the ground.
Yeah, I understand
on the surface, and then it's going to hop again to another part of the crater, and then it's going to hop out of the crater.
So the rationale for the hopping is that the gravity is pretty low and it's not a very fuel expensive thing to do. It's better than driving around on wheels.
It is a way to get farther from the lander with other payloads that can fit on the hopper.
Okay.
That's the idea. And this was developed by Intuitive Machines to offer as a commercial service.
All right.
So this is their test flight of that. And it's really cool. So there's a lot going on. So there will be, if both are successful, there will be two, not one, there will be two robotic lunar landers on the surface of Earth's moon, Luna, and during the same lunar day. It is. I'm so excited right now.
You should see Bob. He is he's giddy. He's
I am.
bouncing around. He's got this big grin on his face.
This is as excited as I've been since back in 69 through 72 when the Apollo missions were landing on the moon.
So we got two. So one of them's landing on the 2nd of March.
Yes.
Or will have landed on the 2nd of March.
Yes.
And one will, one will land and then one is going to be on the 6th of March, you said.
Yes.
And they'll both be operating at that time. And there's going to be no shenanigans taking place between those, not like
they have different ways of communicating back. So,
okay.
And
they're a long ways away from each other.
They're not near each other on the surface.
Okay. This is the last question.
Okay.
You said landing very far south, right? So it's in perpetual shadow. Is that difficult to land at the poles? Is it difficulter than landing near the equator?
It is. Yeah, it requires more delta V, if I can use that phrase, more ability to change velocity to go into a polar orbit than a equatorial orbit.
Really?
The Apollo landings were all fairly low inclination near closer to the equator. Because it takes more propellant to get into a polar orbit, because you're not taking advantage of the motion, the motion that you already have.
The sideways motion.
Yeah, the sideways motion that you already have.
All right. Okay, that is great. Well, I'm hoping, Bob. Hopefully, the following thing I'm going to say, the listeners will sound baffled. But we had some audio difficulties during recording of this, and if I can do a good job editing, it will be seamless. If not, we apologize. We apologize for any inconvenience this may cause. And fortunately, it's just been a software error here. This has nothing to do with the. With the operational deficiencies.
Rafe froze and I couldn't hear him anymore, but he could hear me. And so I kept talking.
Yes. Well, you kept talking for a while, but I think you're the only person who couldn't hear me. I think I still got recorded.
Oh, okay. Well, that should be fun too. That needs to be an outtake.
Oh, that's why you said that. He said, all right.
Okay.
All right. That is it. So pay attention to these rocket things happening around you, and enjoy the rest of the winter. Watch out for the bulbs. Make sure you appreciate the trains when they roll through your town. And in the meantime, I'm going to encourage everybody to seek the good, live virtuously, and flourish, and enjoy the adventure of life.
It's going to be a great day.